Welcome to Book Talks, where stories aren't just read, they're understood. Today, the book under discussion is The Plague by Albert Camus. And to kick things off, just imagine waking up in a town where your absolute biggest worry is your next business deal.
Right, like you're stressed about shipping rates or you're obsessively checking your calendar.
Exactly. You're rushing to the office, you step outside, and there's just a dead, blood-spurting rat right on your doorstep.
Which is horrifying.
Right, but you
Can't
just
say it.
brush it off. You're annoyed. But then the next day, there are 10, then 1,000, then like 8,000 dead rats filling the streets.
It is such a visceral setup. And, today our deep dive is looking at exactly that scenario. We're exploring what happens when the illusion of our modern, hyper-scheduled lives just shatters completely.
Yeah, humanity being forced to confront the absolute unthinkable.
Exactly. The text uses this sudden, terrifying epidemic to really dissect the human mind under pressure. We're looking at a cross-section of humanity when all the normal rules of life are just suspended.
Because when you strip away the routines and the commerce, what's actually left?
Right. How do we cope when our entire worldview is suddenly rendered obsolete by this completely indifferent force of nature?
And to really grasp the shock of this, we have to look at the baseline reality of this town, Oran, in the 1940s. It's a French port on the Algerian coast, and the text goes out of its way to emphasize how totally soulless this place is.
Oh, completely. It's described as treeless, glamourless, just...
Totally unremarkable.
Yeah, unremarkable. You literally have to walk out of your way to even notice the ocean.
Which is wild for a coastal town.
Yeah.
But the citizens are just deeply bored, they are creatures of habit, and their absolute highest priority is making money.
Their chief aim in life is, quote, doing business.
Doing business. That surface-level obsession is exactly what makes Oran feel so incredibly modern to me. When you read about their fixation on ledgers and telephone calls, it feels identical to modern hustle culture.
Oh, absolutely. The narrator observed that the easiest way to understand a town is to look at how its people work, love, and die. And in Oran, all three are done with this feverish yet completely casual air. People work obsessively from morning till night. Their marriages just settle into these mild, unthinking routines.
And dying. Like, dying there seems so inconvenient.
Yeah, a dying person feels completely out of place because illness demands time, it demands attention. And Oran is entirely focused on commerce. It's built entirely on the surface.
Everyone is just consumed by the business of living. It makes the impending disaster deeply unsettling because their reality looks exactly like, your daily calendar, packed, stressed, and completely ignoring the natural world outside.
And then into this hyper-scheduled bubble comes a tiny, almost imperceptible crack.
The rat.
The rat. It begins with an anomaly too small for a busy person to care about. On the morning of April 16th, Dr. Bernard Rieux leaves his surgery, walks down the stairs, and steps on something soft.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's a dead rat on the landing. He just kicks it aside and goes about his day.
Because he's busy.
Right. It's only later that the image comes back to him, and he realizes blood was spurting from its mouth.
But the reaction that really trips me up here is the building's porter, M. Michel. Dr. Rieux mentions the dead rat to him, and M. Michel is just utterly indignant.
He is outraged.
Outraged. He insists, point blank, there weren't no rats in the building. And I'm just struggling to understand the psychology here. I mean, why is it that when faced with a glaring anomaly, the rat is literally right there on the floor? A person's first instinct is to get angry and insist it isn't real.
Well, it is the ultimate manifestation of cognitive dissonance. We build our routines, our neat little categories, just to feel safe. Anomalies threaten that safety.
So acknowledging the rat means acknowledging he's not safe.
Exactly. To accept the rat is to accept that his clean, respectable building, and by extension, his whole reality is compromised. So anger becomes this immediate defense mechanism.
Oh, I see.
If Michel can blame it on a prank by some local youths, he regains his sense of control. The banality of that denial is profound. He isn't just rejecting the rat, he's rejecting the chaos the rat represents.
Wow. But reality, obviously, does not care about M. Michel's need for control, because it escalates fast.
Really fast.
Soon, tens of thousands of rats are pouring out of basements and sewers in these wavering, agonizing files. They do a little pirouette and just fall dead in the open air.
It's a horrific image.
And the Ransdok Information Bureau, which usually just broadcasts mundane local news, suddenly has to announce this insane body count. They report, I think it was 6,231 rats collected in a single day.
Yep, and a few days later it hits 8,000 in a single day.
Massive piles of them.
The sheer volume forces a shift. The town moves from annoyance to creeping panic. People start accusing the sanitation authorities of slackness.
Right, blaming someone else.
Always. And then, just as abruptly as it began, the phenomenon stops, the rats disappear, the streets are clean.
The town breathes a massive sigh of relief.
But the relief is a horrific trap.
Because the rats didn't disappear because the anomaly was fixed. They disappeared because the disease ran out of animal hosts.
And now it needs humans.
And the very first casualty is M. Michel, the indignant porter.
The irony is brutal.
It really is. He is hit with a mysterious fever, a temperature of 104, and he develops these excruciating hard lumps, buboes in his neck, armpits, and groin.
He's totally delirious, vomiting, shouting, "Them rats, them blasted rats."
And within days, he is dead. The disease has officially crossed the species barrier.
Which forces the town's doctors, specifically Dr. Rieux and his older colleague Dr. Castel, to recognize the terrifying truth. They know exactly what those symptoms mean.
They know it's the plague.
Right. But when they try to mobilize the local government, they slam into a wall of institutional denial that totally dwarfs M. Michel's personal denial.
Oh man, the meetings between the doctors and the authorities like Dr. Richard and the prefect are incredibly frustrating to read about. Rieux and Castel are demanding immediate drastic action.
But the officials flat out refuse to use the word plague.
Yeah, the prefect says something like, take prompt action if you like, but don't attract attention, because he is terrified of a public panic over what he claims might just be a false alarm.
Dr. Richard even tries to completely rebrand the disease. He calls it special type of fever with inguinal complications.
Wait, inguinal complications? So they are literally just using fancy medical jargon for swollen groins just to avoid saying the P word.
Exactly that. They are playing semantic games while people are actively dying in their homes. The prefect insists he needs a formal, professional declaration that is definitively the plague before he will enact any rigorous quarantine measures.
Because those measures are required by law and they disrupt everything.
Right, they want certainty before they disrupt the economy. Rieux points out the sheer absurdity of this. He says it's not a question of the vocabulary you use, it's a question of time. While they debate terminology, the disease is multiplying.
It reminds me of ignoring the check engine light on your car because taking it to the mechanic would ruin your weekend plans. You just convince yourself it's a sensor error until the engine literally catches fire. But why are these leaders so deeply resistant to the truth?
The narrator diagnoses this perfectly. The people of Oran, especially its leaders, are humanists.
What does that mean in this context?
Well, being a humanist here means they believe humanity is the absolute center of the universe. They don't believe in pestilences because pestilences are not made to man's measure.
I get it. It's hubris.
Exactly. A plague rules out the future. It cancels business trips. It destroys the economy. It silences the exchange of views. They think a plague is a bad dream that will pass simply because it doesn't fit into their busy schedules.
They forgot to be modest.
Yes, assuming they were completely immune to the chaotic forces of nature.
That is a chilling reflection on modern society. We just assume the power grid will always work, the supply chains will always deliver, and global disasters won't reach our doorstep because the alternative is just too inconvenient to entertain.
But the bureaucratic hesitation inevitably fails. The weather gets hot and muggy, people are dropping dead in terrifying numbers, and the undeniable reality forces their hand.
Right, the turning point arrives in the form of a telegram from the capital.
The bureaucratic language is finally stripped away. It just reads, "Proclaim a state of plague. Stop, close the town."
And with that, the gates of Oran are shut tight, the trains are halted, mail is forbidden.
Which completely shifts the narrative from the physical horror of the disease to the psychological horror of exile.
People are instantly severed from the outside world.
It's a clean-cut deprivation that catches everyone totally unawares. Husbands who had completely trusted their wives suddenly find themselves consumed by jealousy.
They're torturing themselves with visions of what their spouses are doing miles away.
Mothers yearn desperately for their children.
We usually think of memory as a comforting thing, right? Like a cozy blanket you wrap around yourself when things get tough. But in this state of exile, memory turns toxic.
It really does.
The text describes these keen shafts of memory that stung like fire. Remembering the past just highlights the agonizing deprivation of the present. When your future is canceled, looking backward just becomes a form of self-torture.
That is such a crucial insight. Under normal circumstances, a town facing a crisis might find an outlet in heightened social activity or collective action.
But the plague demands isolation.
Right, it forces inactivity. The townspeople are trapped in the same dull routines inside the walls, left with nothing but the elusive solace of those toxic memories you mentioned.
And over time, even the capacity to hope begins to erode. Initially, people try to calculate the duration of their exile, right? Like they imagine a reunion in a few weeks or months.
But eventually, the most pessimistic among them realize something devastating. If this has lasted 6 months, there is absolutely no reason it couldn't last another 6.
Wow. And when that realization sets in, their courage just collapses. To survive the sheer mental anguish of waiting, they have to deliberately murder their own hope.
They stop projecting into the future entirely. They begin to drift.
The narrator says they lived through life rather than lived, the prey of aimless days and sterile memories like wandering shadows.
They only acquire substance by rooting themselves entirely in the present moment of their distress.
So when hope evaporates and you're surrounded by death, how does anyone avoid just losing their mind entirely?
Well, the text zooms in on how specific, wildly different individuals construct coping mechanisms to survive this crucible.
Let's start with Jean Tarot.
Tarot is a fascinating, enigmatic outsider. He arrived in Oran just before the plague, he has private wealth, and he doesn't engage in business at all.
Instead, he keeps these discursive diaries filled with seemingly trivial, absurd details. His diaries are bizarre.
They really are. He observes a town as if looking through the wrong end of a telescope.
He writes down snippets of meaningless conversations on trams, and he becomes obsessed with this dapper little old man across the street who comes out on his balcony every single day, tears up paper to lure stray cats, and then spits vigorously on the cats when they get close.
And Tarot documents this routine as if it's vital information.
It seems so absurd, but Tarot is using hyper-observation to ground himself, right?
Exactly. When the macro reality is uncontrollable and terrifying, he focuses intensely on the micro reality. He poses a philosophical query in his notebook. How contrive not to waste one's time?
And his answer is to be fully, painfully aware of every passing second.
Yeah, even suggesting exercises like spending days on an uneasy chair in a dentist's waiting room.
It sounds like torture.
It does, but this hyper-awareness isn't just an eccentric hobby. It's what allows Tarot to maintain his sanity enough to become the chief architect of the voluntary sanitary squads.
Right, the civilian groups who step up to fight the disease when the government fails. He finds clarity in the absurd.
He does. But then you have someone like Joseph Grand, a municipal clerk. Grand actually saved his neighbor, a man named Cottard, from hanging himself right as the plague started.
But Grand's coping mechanism is totally different from Tarot's. Grand is obsessively writing a book, but he is permanently stuck on the very first sentence.
It's a scene about an elegant horsewoman riding down an avenue.
He spends mornings, whole weeks, agonizing over adjectives, rewriting this one single sentence over and over.
Grand represents the desperate escape into minutia. The world is ending, bodies are piling up, and he is trying to perfect a single, inconsequential sentence.
It's like someone obsessively organizing the apps on their phone into color-coded folders while their house is actively burning down. It's a false locus of control.
It's exactly what it is. If he can make this one sentence absolutely flawless, he feels like he has some agency in a chaotic universe.
Right. And then you have the neighbor Grand saved, Cottard. Cottard is arguably the most disturbing character study here because he actively thrives during the epidemic.
He does. Before the plague, Cottard was a criminal living in constant isolating fear of arrest. He was deeply paranoid.
But once the plague hits, the police are far too busy managing the dead to investigate his past crimes.
So he becomes a smuggler and makes a fortune.
But it's not just about the money for him, is it? He tells Dr. Rieux he feels very fit. He is actually joyful about the destruction. He says this town's going to be in an unholy mess, and he says it with, real exuberance.
Because the plague provides profound psychological relief for him. Before, his fear and guilt isolated him from society. Now, every single person in Oran is living in a state of constant fear and isolation.
The plague brings the entire town down to his level.
Exactly. As he notes, they're all in the same boat now. He profits from the chaos, yes, but he also finally feels a sense of belonging in the shared misery.
That is incredibly dark. And in sharp contrast to Cottard's embrace of the chaos, we have Rambert, the journalist. Rambert is from Paris. He was only in Oran on a short assignment, and his singular goal is to escape and get back to his wife.
He feels he doesn't belong to this town's misery.
Rambert embodies the painful struggle between personal happiness and collective duty. He pursues every avenue, legal and illegal, to get out.
He navigates the criminal underground, dealing with smugglers like Garcia and a man named Gonzalez, who is bizarrely obsessed with association football.
Rambert insists that his individual right to love and happiness supersedes the town's collective suffering.
And then there is the theological crisis of Father Panelou, the Jesuit priest.
Oh, this is a big one. In the first month of the plague, he delivers this fierce, fire and brimstone sermon. He stands in the pulpit, points at the congregation, and uses the word you.
He tells them the plague is God's punishment for their sins. You have deserved it, he says.
Which is the classic human attempt to impose meaning onto suffering. If the plague is a divine punishment, then the universe still possesses a moral order.
It's brutal, but it makes sense to him. However, as the plague drags on, Panelou's theology is tested to its absolute breaking point.
He is forced to witness the prolonged, agonizing death of a young, innocent child, the police magistrate's son.
And after that, his second sermon changes dramatically. He speaks in a gentler tone, and instead of saying you, he says we. He includes himself in the suffering.
But I have to push back here. Isn't that shift from you to we a bit of a cop-out? I mean, is he just adapting his theology on the fly to avoid admitting his first sermon was horribly cruel and wrong? It feels like damage control for his worldview.
It's easy to read it cynically, sure, but the text portrays it as a genuine, shattering trauma. Watching an innocent child die destroys the neat logic of his first sermon.
Because you can't explain away a child's agony as punishment for sin.
Right. By shifting to we, Panelou isn't just doing PR. He is acknowledging that the suffering is incomprehensible, and all he can do is stand in solidarity with the sufferers. His faith becomes something much darker and more difficult to maintain.
These characters cover the entire spectrum of human defense mechanisms. You have Grand escaping into art, Qatar embracing the chaos, Panelou desperately seeking divine meaning, and Rambert fighting for personal escape.
Which sets up the climax of Rambert's arc and really frames the ultimate philosophical conclusion of the text.
Yes, Rambert's decision is so pivotal. After months of agonizing delays, Rambert finally secures his illegal escape route. The smugglers give him the green light. He can leave Oran, go back to Paris, and be with the woman he loves.
But at the very last second,
he changes his mind. He goes to Dr. Rieux and Rieux, who are utterly exhausted from fighting the disease, and he tells them he is staying. He says, it may be shameful to be happy by oneself.
It's profound realization.
Yeah.
Rambert understands that to flee would be to sever his fundamental connection to humanity.
The plague has made Oran's business everybody's business.
You cannot isolate your own happiness from the collective suffering without losing a crucial part of your own humanity in the process.
And this choice leads right into one of the most powerful conversations in the entire narrative. Rieux and Rieux are taking a rare moment of rest, and Rieux asks Rieux a very direct question. Do you believe in God, doctor?
And Rieux essentially says no. He says he's fumbling in the dark, struggling to make something out.
Rieux completely rejects grand, heroic narratives. Earlier, when Rambert tried to talk about dying for an idea, Rieux stopped him cold. He says, there's no question of heroism in all this. It's a matter of common decency.
Common decency?
Rieux explains that for him, common decency simply consists in doing his job. He is a doctor, there are sick people, so he must try to cure them. It is incredibly unglamorous.
It is the philosophy of resistance stripped of all romanticism. The narrator explicitly states that they don't want to over-glorify the sanitary squads.
Doing the right thing shouldn't be seen as some rare, godlike virtue. It should just be the baseline of human existence.
The text posits that people are generally more good than bad, and that the evil in the world mostly comes from ignorance. Fighting the plague is just the logical, necessary response to that suffering.
But Rieux admits something really heavy during this conversation. He acknowledges that because he cannot save everyone, and because death will always eventually take his patience, his fight against the plague is a never-ending defeat.
A never-ending defeat.
I find myself really wrestling with this. I mean, is this concept of committing yourself to a never-ending defeat hopelessly depressing? Or is there actually something liberating about choosing to do the right thing, even when you know you can't ultimately win?
It is absolutely liberating. If you only do the right thing when you are guaranteed a final permanent victory, your morality is conditional.
Ah, that makes sense.
Rieux's stance is unconditional. He fights death knowing full well that death is the ultimate victor of the human condition. But the act of fighting the daily, exhausting exercise of common decency is what gives human life its dignity.
It's an assertion of our profound rebellious spirit against a totally indifferent universe.
Exactly. You don't fight to conquer death permanently. You fight to alleviate the suffering of your fellow human beings in the here and now.
That reframing changes everything. Let's step back and look at the whole picture we've unpacked today. These sources show us that disasters, whether it's a sudden epidemic, a societal collapse, or a personal tragedy, strip away our comfortable illusions of control.
They expose the absurdities of humanism and bureaucracy, like officials arguing over the definition of a fever while a town perishes.
But within the crucible of that shared suffering, they also reveal that human beings are capable of immense dignity, and that dignity doesn't require sweeping heroism or perfect theology.
No, it stems from simple common decency, doing your job, helping your neighbor, and refusing to look away from the reality of the pain.
The plague forces every single character to decide who they are when the world stops making sense.
And the most enduring, meaningful response isn't denial. It isn't escaping into minutia, and it isn't profiting from the chaos. It is the simple, exhausting daily work of trying to heal the sick and alleviate suffering.
It is a remarkable lens through which to view our own lives. So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. If the plague is a metaphor for any great inescapable adversity in life, a collective crisis, an unfair diagnosis, an absurd situation you simply cannot control, what does your version of common decency look like when faced with a battle you know you cannot completely win? Thanks for listening to Book Talks. If you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next conversation.